Hey, folks. This might be everyone at this point. Salutations to you as well, Alessandro. Okay. Good. 14. That's a good size group. Okay, and we're recording, so that's good. All right, folks, how you doing? It's Tuesday the 18th. Everybody have a good MLK day yesterday? Yeah, good. It was a nice break. It's kind of a shame it happens like right in the middle of the beginning of the semester. Maybe in a couple of weeks, we would have really enjoyed having that Monday off. Okay. Not much to go over today. If I guess I could share my screen with you. Let me do that. Whoops. And bring up my web courses here. Start with intro. Yeah. We'll start here. Okay. So I'm hoping that you guys are looking this stuff over before we have our Zoom meetings. That would help. I know that many of you have already engaged in the discussion about the magazine article, so that's a good thing. I think what I want to do is maybe talk to you a little bit about that here in this forum today, for those of you who are here live, and then we can we'll talk about there's another article as well that I had you read out of Movie Maker magazine. Between the two, it'll sort of form the basis for our conversation. Somebody was asking me in an email what I did with the recording from last week. It's right here. See that? Recorded on January 11th, 2022. Okay. So that's where I'm going to put them. So last semester was here from August 26th. And here's last week. Okay. So I'll do the same thing with this week's recording and each subsequent recording for the remainder of the semester. Okay. And so that's where you can go to look for those if you want to revisit this conversation or check your notes or study for something. That's where it'll be. Okay. Next. Your entrance survey. I'm hoping that everybody has done that now hopefully by this past Friday. This is for your financial aid allotment and everything. So if you haven't done it, please go ahead and do it. You don't have to study for it. There's really no way to study for it. It's really simply a few basic questions that we will compare to your answers at the end of the semester in your exit survey, and compare and contrast the feedback to see if this course is being effective at all and in what areas. So go ahead and take this if you haven't already. And then we will store it until the end of the semester. What was the next thing up? Okay, so the first assignment that you had was just to read this IndieWire magazine article, 6 things that you have to know to make it in the film industry, as if there were only 6 and as if these were the correct questions to even be asking and whether or not the answers were effective. What I want to find out from you is, did you find any of the advice in the article helpful? I think I put it in your folder here for this class. I can pull up the PDF. Yeah. So this was Barbara Doyle. And so her, I guess her claim is she was some kind of producer. Over at, I forget what they said she was producing. What does this article say here? she's now at Chapman University, which is all well and good. I guess she was freelance at the time. So production coordinator, production supervisor. Okay. Do you guys know what a production coordinator does? You should have covered that in your intro class. If nowhere else, maybe your producing class. Production coordinator on a structured film project or television show. Anybody? Whoops. Stretch out my tiles here. What do you think? Who's got an idea what that production coordinator is doing?
Finding locations and organizing the crew, making sure everything is like ready to go. Just like setting up the set for the crew to come and film.
Nope. Your production coordinator is more clerical than that. Generally doesn't work on set, typically works in the production office, which is usually based either at the studio or in an independent office setting that has been arranged for the duration of that project. Your production coordinator isn't going to arrange locations. That's going to be your location manager. Okay. And the production coordinator is also not going to prepare the set for shooting. Okay. There's other individuals that are going to do things like that, namely the assistant director and their staff are generally the ones that are going to manage the day-to-day operations on set, and they're going to do that in coordination with the unit production manager, who's really simply tracking budget and progress of shooting based on the budget. The production coordinator is there to sort of kind of like Debbie Doyle is in the office for the film program. Debbie is like a go-between between management, the administration, and all the faculty. So the faculty are at the ground level teaching in the face-to-face situations. And the administration is off somewhere, in their offices and so forth, doing, administrative things. And Debbie is kind of coordinating conversations between that administration and the faculty, coordinating the needs of the faculty based on what they require for their performance on the level face-to-face with the students. And so she's kind of there as an intermediary that offers the structure of a coordinating office that can handle communications between different parties, catalog information, create files of any documentation generated either by the faculty or the administration, make all of that available to any parties that need access to that information throughout the course of a semester, let's say. Production coordinators kind of doing the same sort of thing. So they're in the production office. They are making sure that all the documents and information that the production manager relies on is coming in effectively from the set. It's being communicated by the AD staff. The AD staff is there at the location. They are managing the production schedule from the point of view of the crew, from the moment they show up to work during the day and the hour that they leave, making sure that the schedule and all the objectives on the call sheet, which represents the day's schedule, are met, and that those objectives have been effectively ticked off the list of things to do, and we move on like that on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so production coordinator is a pretty complex job. They are the point of contact between the reality on the ground and the objectives and the vision of the objectives on the part of the administration. So that was what this woman was doing in her freelance career. And I really wish I could get that tab to show up now. Let's see here. You got to do this. There we go. So Barbara Doyle, kind of like our Debbie Doyle, was doing a similar thing out in the world. Production supervisor is usually somebody that comes onto a project from the studio level, and that individual is there to observe the day-to-day activity on the set, observe whether or not the team on the ground is being effective at reaching all the objectives, making sure that the best interest of the studio, who has at that point probably supplied the operating budget, making sure that the objectives of the studio are being met, and then that film is moving ahead on schedule and is going to finish on schedule. Okay, so production supervisor has a little bit more of an oversight role, usually empowered by the studios, and is on a location with the shooting crew to make sure that everything is running smoothly and that there's nothing that individual can't do to help things along, using the powers granted to them at the studio level, like maybe micro increases to the budget, or new contract negotiations with actors, or things of that nature. The necessity, for instance, maybe to call in a bondsman and handle an insurance claim against the schedule not being met, for instance, on a feature film. So it's pretty important position. So that's the author of this article. So that is her ethos for presenting these arguments and these points of view on these particular things. So what were your impressions of the article? Did anybody find this article unhelpful in any way, vague, or helpful and informative? What's your feedback on this particular article? Should I interpret from this lack of feedback that you guys have not read this article?
I was going to say, I'm kind of torn on the article.
Torn on the article in what respect?
So I think there are a few points that I agree with. What was that?
Such as?
Reputation.
Mm-hmm.
That does make sense to me.
Okay.
I haven't been on a lot of sets, but the few I have, I would say I would like to say most people find me enjoyable in a sense. Like if I was unenjoyable, I believe she makes that point. Less people are going to want me on those sets.
Yeah, I think she's making a statement here, as if to say, be, agreeable, be likable, don't make waves, and don't be a distraction, perhaps.
Yeah.
So I think I could agree with those points. It might be a little reductive and a little bit simple in its point of view of what's going on. There's a lot of tension on the set. There's a lot of pressure on the set. Especially, the bigger the budget gets, a lot of times the more pressure you can feel mounting around the day's work, around performance, and around the pressures of political affiliations and how everybody's getting along. So it can be a very complex situation to try and describe or reduce to a fundamental argument of you're either the life of the party or you're not. I think it's possible to work in the situation where you can be effective and get your work done, and avoid, I think, maybe in some cases, some of the pressure or the situation where you're the brunt of conversation or gossip, idle gossip or something, as if to infer that, we have nothing better to do on the set than, gossip about one another and how we're behaving or how we're dressed or what we're doing, which is not to say that people won't be people and they'll do those types of things. But I think on most productions, especially television, we're all too busy, with our list of daily objectives to really to sort of engage in this kind of stuff. This sort of happens, I think, kind of behind the scenes, after hours, when you have time to stop and think about, what did that person mean by that comment when they said that thing, on the other hand, she had some pretty good advice about sort of keeping your opinions to yourself in situations where you are working in an environment where there are a lot of temperamental egos, or there's a lot of pressure already. especially if you're an individual who's not really been invited to the opinion party. It can be it can be a distraction, or it can be a point of contention if you then insert yourself in that process and criticize something out of order, perhaps, that maybe would be better left unsaid in many situations. So talking about, for instance, your unexpurgated critique about, how something was just shot or how it was lit or something, and on the set, and sort of making those individual assertions known publicly might not be in your best interest. Like I said, especially if you're not the person whose job it is to provide that kind of feedback. Usually what you're there to do on the set is the job you were hired to do, and they just want you to do that, because they reserve feedback and critique from department heads whose part of their job description is to, offer their input, offer their advice on certain things. But even those department heads, after a certain point, are expected to just sort of follow along, help out in every way that they can, based on the powers that they wield in their own departments, and then let the sort of the director and the producers sort out the rest of what's going on. So reputation is important, but I think really the conversation is about, how effective you are at your job, how effective you are at networking, and how effective you are at collaborating with people in the moment of production, and not necessarily whether or not you're socially an interesting person or not, because that really a lot of times doesn't come into question. Anybody else have any thoughts on this article? Anything that you would want to comment on about some of the advice that's given? This is the part where somebody should start speaking up and offering their opinion or their input on this. This should be a discussion that is going to benefit everybody here in the group, folks. So, and if you haven't read the article, please do so, because your discussion assignment hinges on your understanding of what's written here and your opinion on the advice being given. So, relationships and about history. It's about history and not friendships. This is a really important point of distinction in this article. So this author, and I agree, when collaborators say they have a history with one another, what they're relying on is the history of effective collaboration. They're not worried about the history of the last time you guys went out drinking, or what happened at the last holiday party. That's not the kind of relationship that they're referring to. And oftentimes it's probably a good idea to keep those kinds of social relationships separated from your professional relationships in that regard. As easily as somebody can lose confidence in you for a poor performance on the set, they might also lose confidence in you by getting the wrong impression, for instance, of how well you hold your liquor. That's probably not something that you want to, information you don't want to make available to the people that you necessarily are working with. That can be a problem for you down the road. In the professional environment, really, you're on a film set to do the job that you've been hired to do, and hopefully you're not there simply because you're a lot of fun at the bar. Okay, I think that would kind of be one of the worst reasons for you to be on a job, is because you're everybody's favorite drinking buddy. Well, that is a good thing, and that can have a lot of value. If you're simply there because of that sort of extracurricular value, and you're not there because of any added value that you have in terms of your skill set or your job performance, you might want to consider or reevaluate your working relationships so that every time you get a job, it's based on your reputation as a good collaborator, a good technician, a good creative, and not simply be that you got the job because you were friends with the producer, for instance. While that can be an excellent leg up when you have no other arrows in your quiver to use at that point, but it'll become important to you over time, I think, to make sure that you feel like the gains that you make, the progress and the growth that you make in your chosen discipline has to do with your time invested and your experience and the things you learn in doing your job well and refining your technique. Because the other criteria really has no basis for understanding when we're trying to decide whether or not, you know, you're a good fit for a certain kind of project that's going to have certain demands and certain criteria that have to be met. At no point in time does, you know, your social prowess really have much to do with whether or not you're going to handle the pressure of large engineering concepts or, you know, complex technical workflows or even, you know, people management and dealing with egos of actors and you know, some of the high valued talent creatively that are working on sets that can be as volatile and delicate of an ego as an actor can be. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that. And I know that it's early on in your professional career to have a great deal of feedback in this area, but you may have a sense already from some of your practical work experience where this advice falls on your own radar. I'm interested in hearing that if anybody has any feedback that they want to offer in that regard, because we can discuss it and we can find out if this article is helping you in any way, or maybe I need to find a different one or a better one.
I would agree that the friendships are not really like the main part of why you should get a job. I do think it helps a little bit, especially at our point in our careers when we are still finding our breakthrough. Being friends with people and networking well and just being known as like someone easy to work with is good for for hearing about projects and getting invites on them. But obviously, if you're not good at the job, you're not going to get invited back. But I do think that like being that good drinking buddy, being that good friend does help at least break into the industry.
It's certainly an icebreaker. So this interesting sort of caveat that she gives us towards the end of the article, I guess, realize that you're dealing with gamblers. That has a lot to do with that sort of social relevance that we're talking about. And this can come into play when you're dealing like with really big markets where chances are you can get hired on a job and you really don't know many people on that job. What a lot of times what employers are looking for is a benchmark or some kind of feedback that they can get from somebody who's already in the fold of that project in some way, shape, or form that can vouch for you in any way. Because in a market where there's thousands of people that are vying for jobs and there's, you know, one or two positions on a film crew and very few people know you on any level except maybe a personal one, at least they can vouch for you in some regard and say, yeah, he's a stable-minded person who can probably handle the pressure. He's a really nice guy, never raises, you know, never encourages conflict, things of that nature. So it can help as an icebreaker with regard to employers who maybe have no other point of reference for you at all. This is one of the arguments for having a lot of your content available and accessible online in the form of websites and resumes and things of that nature, so that people can do a little homework on you and get a sense of what your field experience has been and so forth, so that they can combine that with then maybe some more personal feedback that they can get from somebody on the crew that sort of undergirds what they're able to find out through research about your skill sets and your job experience. So yeah, if you can think about, try. I know it's hard sometimes because it does seem quite adversarial at times. The needs and the objectives of the people working on set can sometimes appear to be at cross purposes to the needs and objectives of the producers on a project. But it is kind of important from time to time to be able to see from their point of view, what their concerns might be, and understand that there are going to be times when people are going to give you a shot at an opportunity, and they're going to do it on faith based on very little in terms of confirmation or feedback. Other than, yeah, the key grip recommended you, says you're a nice guy, worked on a number of movies with you, and thinks that you're probably a good fit. That little bit of word of mouth can help, but a lot of times when a producer is making a choice whether to hire you or another fill in the blank editor, cinematographer, gaffer, whatever it might be, if and when they choose to go with you, if they don't have any prior relationship with you, it is a little bit of a gamble, which is why you want to conduct yourself in a way that's not going to raise red flags or alarms when people see you working on set. Don't appear to be cavalier, be prepared, be on time, be alert, be present in all the moments, in all the conversations, especially around camera, that have to do with expediting the objective. It's about how you carry yourself professionally in that regard. These are all important things that you'll have to get a feel for as you move out into the industry and you start working, especially in groups with people that you've never been around before. I think that's where it matters the most. For instance, if you guys as a group were going to make a film together, I mean, you all know each other. I don't know if you've been in classes together, how often you've been, in other courses together, and whether or not you have a great deal of awareness of one another or social familiarity with one another outside of class, but you're known entities and you could probably work together and you have some common ground, all being UCF students, all having taken similar classes in the same kind of degree program. And that can count for a lot when you're talking about putting you guys together as a group and asking you to do something, perform something, produce something. It's an entirely different feel when you get on a film set, for instance, where you don't know anyone. That's when I think some of these opinions are really going to start to make sense, because at that point, when people have nothing to go on, the last thing you want to do is give them any ammunition for making assumptions about you that may or may not be true. Okay. Talking about your attitude, this is sort of playing into it. One of your most precious assets, perhaps. I mean, you have to have a good attitude. You have to have a good grounded outlook on what's going on. In this case, there's a couple of examples. I think it was this article rather, talking about the guy who just goes and gets the director's coffee all the time, and how they weren't sort of hired to do that. I mean, the reality is you're hired to do whatever they ask you to do, I suppose. So, I mean, if getting coffee for the director is the thing they're paying you for, then, do a good job at getting coffee for the director, and maybe in your interview process or in the course of, looking for work, you'll be a little bit more careful about qualifying the positions that you're asking for. Maybe tailoring your job search to the kinds of jobs where what the expectations are, and you can match those expectations to your own personal skill set. But on the other hand, if you just need a job and it doesn't really matter what that job is until you can sort of establish yourself, if they hire you to make coffee, then make damn good coffee, because making coffee on a film set, I guarantee you, is still a better job than anything else you could land at the mall. Okay. Because if you're working on a film set, even if you're just making coffee, you're still working on a film set, you know, and that ultimately is going to get you a lot closer to your goal than, you know, working at the video game stop, you know. It just is. So even though it's only making coffee, just understand it won't be that way forever unless your career path is to become a craft service person, in which case it's all valuable experience when you learn how to make a terrific cup of coffee, right? But let's say you want to be a director someday. The first step in being a, you know, in becoming that director is working in service to a director who's going to take you on in the beginning when you don't know anything about being a director and you're just trying to learn the ropes. And one of the things that making coffee for that person is going to do for you is win their confidence. Okay. Once you win that person's confidence, then they're going to be willing to give you things that they might not give you if they didn't really know you very well, or if they didn't really prefer or care for you very much, right? And maybe something as simple as making a good cup of coffee in the morning can be that thing that's going to cement your relationship with that individual and allow them the comfort of feeling like, yeah, this guy, you know, he comes to work every day and doesn't complain when I ask for my, you know, special formulated latte that takes 5 minutes to prepare, or, you know, requires hopping in a cab and running downtown to Starbucks or whatever it is, you know, does it without complaining and, you know, always has a smile and a good morning. And I really appreciate that because I spent all morning before I was even awake and aware arguing with the producer about whether or not the enormous workload that was on the call sheet for today is going to get done on time. And so I've already got that in my mind as the director, and I'm coming to work and I'm already stressed out because let's face it, I don't want to have that conversation at 7 o'clock in the morning when I just rolled out of bed, when all I really want is a good fucking cup of coffee. And where's my assistant? And oh, wow, here they are. And oh man, that's what I really need right now in this moment, right? And then that cup of coffee becomes super important. It's now more than just a cup of coffee. Now it's kind of a statement of your dedication, your reliability, your willingness to do whatever it is that's asked of you, and that, you know, your contribution may not be immediately evident. Certainly, whether or not you made the director a good cup of coffee may not translate to the screen, but you weren't hired in a job capacity that's going to translate to the screen in the first place. And not everybody's job does translate to the screen immediately or obviously in their contribution. Does that mean that that contribution is any less relevant? Not really, no. It's kind of on an equal par in a lot of ways. So I think that's the context that you need to think about that story about getting coffee, and about having that positive attitude. Because like I said, at the end of the day, any job in the industry is better than the job that's not in the industry. If you're in the industry, you're in. You know, if you don't like the job you're doing in the industry, then get to know the folks that are in it with you and look for opportunities to move around. But the hardest thing to do is to move around inside an industry where you're on the outside. Okay, that's the hardest thing to do, because until you're inside, you're outside, as George Thorogood would say. I'm outside. This statement right here about I could do it better, you got to be really careful about that kind of attitude. You know, armchair quarterbacking is not really productive at any level in the industry. And it might sound good in the theater when you're sitting there casting your judgments all over whether or not, you know, the director did a good job with the latest X-Men movie or not. You know, that's all well and good. But unless you're being paid to be a film critic, and even then a film critic, I think, has to come from an informed point of view on why they say a movie is good or bad. And if it's merely, emotional, reactive, or responsive feedback, then that's really doesn't have much value either. But certainly until you understand the pressures and the things that are at stake behind the variety of decisions that are made on a film set, um, it's probably best to reserve your judgment, because you really don't know until you're placed in the same situation with the same pressures. You're not really going to know what kind of choices you might make. That's something that'll come in time when you're offered more responsibility and you accept it. Then when you're in those moments, it's not just getting the job done, expediting whatever your list of responsibilities are, but then also being present in those moments, paying attention to what it feels like and how you're making those determinations and decisions, and then process it later. You really don't know what constraints the filmmakers were up against when they made a choice to shoot something a certain way. If you're just there, months or years after the fact in a dark room watching the projection of this thing and making assessments and value judgments, you're really doing it from a position of ignorance, because you don't know what went on. You can assume a lot of things, um, and from a certain point of view, it might be true. You might have done it differently, and that might be true, but it wasn't your call to make. That's the whole point, I think, which is easy to forget sometimes, because at some point, when you're in the business, you feel part of that group and part of that community, and you might say, oh yeah, I saw that movie, but I wouldn't have shot it like that. That's great. When you get hired to shoot, then you can shoot it any way that you want. um, I think sometimes that's part of being a good collaborator, is reserving that kind of snap value judgment to a situation that doesn't really apply. There's lots of things that can happen on a film set that will ruin or disrupt your best plans for the day. You have a call sheet with a whole list of shots and objectives you want to get accomplished, and then it rains and it wasn't supposed to rain. The AD said it was going to be sunny out. The weatherman on TV said it was going to be sunny out. You got to the set and you planned on it being a sunny day, and then it rains. Okay, so now what are you going to do about it? You can't go home. That's not part of the plan. You got a call sheet with a whole list of objectives on it, and you have to get those objectives accomplished. So what are you going to do? How you handle the situation at that point has a great deal to do with what those results are going to look like later, right? And only if you've been there and we're privy to all of the things that went wrong that day can you really say definitively that you would have done it differently or better as a result, because you just don't know till you've been there, right? Anybody have a situation like that you can think of in your recent past or in your time here at film school that you can confirm that sort of assertion?
What was I gonna say?
Yeah.
I remember this wasn't with film. I did an internship where I did some marketing for this company that sells like forklifts and pallet racks and stuff like that. And there was this guy behind me, and he was Air Force, and he got hired to basically like make the warehouse move. And he basically was like, well, in the Air Force, we did it this, and this, and this. And he's like, listen, you've been here a week and a half, and you're telling me how to run my small business like that? I'm not the Air Force. And he's like, you have to remember where you are as well with all this. You have to think like, and then as well, I remember my boss was opening a Tampa location at the same time that he hired this guy. So he was already taking a gamble. And then he wants to like tell him how to run the entire business while he's really still trying to figure it out. And he's young too. So it was interesting. I remember he liked me because I tried to not, I could tell when he was bothered, and I would not bother him until like the end of the day or whatever, when he's cooled off about certain things, because obviously, people are in a position where they don't want to hear those things sometimes. So
Yeah, and I think that was kind of plainly stated in the article as well, which is the job might suck, the situation might not be ideal, but everybody on that set is in it with you at that moment, and everybody kind of knows what the deal is. And so the last thing we need to hear is everybody's opinion on how this sucks, you know. And sometimes it's more helpful to just sort of get the consensus from the crew how we're going to move forward in this situation, and get things done the best we can given the, you know, the constraints that we're dealing with, whether it's rain or, you know, having it get dark before we were done with the day work, or whatever the issues are, you know. Keeping your head on straight and not going there, if you will, can be a really helpful skill or discipline to have, because when everybody's kind of running around, you know, stating the obvious and complaining or panicking about the situation that's rapidly deteriorating, you know, the worst thing you can do is join in, because that fray is just going to run in circles and it's not going to get anything accomplished, you know. Great line in a movie, 6 Days and 7 Nights. Harrison Ford is the charter airplane captain, and he's taking Anne Heche to some tropical island to meet her girlfriend. And they crash the airplane, and they're standing on the top of a hill trying to figure out whether or not they should make a signal fire. And Anne's character is getting all kind of panicky and hyperventilating and you know, kind of bitching and complaining about the obvious of the situation, which is it sucked. The airplane's crashed, they're on an island, there's nobody else here, and how the hell are they going to get off, you know? And then she looks at Harrison Ford's character and she says, aren't you worried? Aren't you alarmed at what's going on? And he says, well, you know, I am the captain of the airplane. Granted, we crashed the airplane, but nevertheless, is it really going to do us any good if I'm going to run around in circles, wringing my hands, saying, oh my God, we're all going to die? You know, you've clearly got that job under control. So I'm going to do the other thing. I'm going to think about how to get us out of here, you know. And that's kind of the mindset you have to be in sometimes, is it can be really easy to deteriorate into the prevailing sentiment of the crowd, which is, oh my God, I can't believe how, you know, terribly this is going. And this is not what we wanted at all. And it's going to suck. And this is a bummer. And yeah, but can we do anything at all to salvage this thing in this moment? Well, we've all got our kind of collective heads together. Or are we all just going to throw up our hands and say, well, it didn't go the way we wanted to, so the hell with it, you know? You kind of can't do that. You got to deliver something. You know, if they don't have anything to cut, then they don't have a movie, right? So at that point, cooler heads need to prevail, and you need to sort of start looking comparatively at what your initial objectives were, what the factors were that changed, and how that's going to affect the outcomes, and pick the outcome with the least amount of complication, which is going to resemble your original objective as closely as possible, without too many compromises in the expectations. You know, what can we do? How can we salvage this situation and get something for the editors to cut, and something that they can put together? Or are we just going to throw our hands up and say, well, it didn't go according to plan, so we don't have anything to show for it, you know? That's really what's at stake here. So what was the other situation we were offered here? Yes, the industry is hyper competitive. Yes, it is very difficult. All of those things are true. Keep your eye on the road ahead of you. Smile. Be the first one who thinks of things when they need someone who can be counted on to do the job with a minimum amount of fuss. Yeah, that's all true. In those cases, look to your department head for leadership in that regard. Usually a person who's been hired to be a department head, whatever that department is based on a number of factors. It's based on their ability to lead, their ability to keep calm under pressure, their ability to be organized and quick with solutions or alternative solutions. It's based on their prior experience and, a reflection of what their work looks like in a finished product. It's all of those things. So if you're new to the set, I would encourage you to definitely look to your department heads and your supervisors for a sense of how to face the challenges and how to, steel yourself for the situation, how to, look to them for, examples of how to respond, for instance, to pressure, which will be, prevalent. So, 2 cautionary tales.
Professor, hello.
Yeah.
Just wanted to let you know that some people have commented in the chat in case you haven't checked it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to check the chat simultaneously while I'm pontificating, but let's see what we
Oh, no,
got.
just for like when you ask for feedback or something. But yeah, that's all.
Yeah, let's see what we got here. Were there questions? Keycraft Service gets paid nicely. That's very true. They make the same rate as anybody on Local 80 out in California, which is base pay right now, probably $40 and change an hour. I would have done Lawrence of Arabia better. Tell that to David Lean. If your contribution is about something that already happened and can't be changed, it's probably not worth sharing. Probably not. Unless it's your job to be, retrospective. Yeah, what's the point, really? It's good for you to understand the difference between what you see, what you prefer, and how you might handle it. But that's for you. That's your own context, right? It doesn't do anybody else any good to know what you might have done had you been in that situation that you were never invited to be a part of. It doesn't help anybody else, but it might be good from your own internal point of view when you're developing your own set of preferences. And I think that's probably as far as that goes, really. Apologies, I had to head off to my next class. Oh, that's fine. Look for the recordings if that's the case. You don't have to come to the live sessions if you can't make it. So check out the recording later, Ben, and have a good afternoon. Thank you for pointing that out to me, because I do often forget to check the chat room. So the cautionary tales, one was about getting coffee. Just because it's in your head doesn't have to come out of your mouth. Yeah, that's funny. I laugh because I was guilty of some of the same stuff when I was young and in the business and didn't know any better. Fortunately, if you make that mistake, you make it in the presence of individuals who are more compassionate than they are reactionary, and they won't simply fire you for saying something dumb in the moment, especially if you're young and inexperienced. That they might actually pull you aside and say, look, I understand how you feel, but you got to understand that it's really not good form for you to sort of say those types of things in a situation like this, where it can be taken out of context, or somebody who's not as understanding as I am might simply fire you for that kind of behavior, as opposed to trying to set you straight about what's expected or what's appropriate and what's not. That's where picking good people to work with and collaborate with is really important. If you don't have that kind of tolerance or sort of safety net built into that relationship, you could possibly cast the wrong criticism at the wrong time and find yourself bounced out on the street. It sucks, but it's one of the possibilities in that reality that we have to come to terms with. I think this is about Dan and the director and the cup of coffee. So we kind of covered that already. You may say to yourself, I hate politics. I can't deal with this kind of BS. I've said the same thing myself. I hate politics. I don't want to deal with politics. Unfortunately, a lot of times the truth is, whether you like politics or not, everybody else is playing politics. So at some point, you sort of have to embrace the game, that you've chosen to participate in, and at least deal with the politics enough to keep your own nose clean and out of the, out of the crossfire, if that's the case. But at some point, you're going to have to at least endure the politics and learn how to negotiate the politics, even if you don't choose to engage in them yourself. And that's true of any job, I think, really, at this point. There's politics at every job, I think. So at this point, you're going to face them one way or the other. Most people with the power to help you in the industry are sharp observers with good instincts. They're constantly checking you out. They're consciously or unconsciously evaluating you. Are you a good risk? Do you believe, or do they believe in you and your abilities? All of that is true, I think. You may not realize it, but especially when you're young in the industry and maybe it's your first time on a job or whatever, if the person who hired you isn't watching you closely, somebody in that situation is watching closely, because it will be their job to do so. And you may or may not be aware of that, observation. So the best course of action would be to assume that you're being watched at all times, and raise your level of play to a point that is above scrutiny. Try not to make those mistakes. If you do, own up to them quickly, and try to be a part of rectifying the situation, especially if it's your fault. If you can do those things, I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to fault you in your performance, even if you make a mistake, because everybody makes them eventually. The fact that you are going to commit an error is 100% at some point. Okay. The only thing that you can do at that point to mitigate the error once it has occurred is to be prepared and completely effective in the rectification of whatever happened as a result of the error. Get on it and fix it right away. Own up to it immediately. Bring it to the attention of your supervisor as soon as you can to involve them so they can be part of the damage control process. And then just, get it done. At the end of the day, that's all they want anyways. Get this job done, fulfill the call sheet for this day, fulfill the call sheet every day for the next 42 days so that we have everything that we need, because we're putting a lot of money on the table, and we need to get something that shows for our investment. So that's really what they want, Any other impressions from this particular article before I move on to the Movie Maker article? They're kind of sweeping generalizations, really. You either have pretty much a sense of what this is, or you're completely lost at this point, I think. I see Alexis's box has been highlighted. Did you have a question, Alexis, or a comment? Okay. Maybe Alexis is not truly with us at this point. Let me move on to the other article then. Let's see here. Alumni offering their advice. This may or may not be helpful to you. Oh, this PDF kind of came out weird. It's gonna scroll down the middle of the page. My apologies for that. Actually, let me see if I can just go to the link instead. Let's try that. Whoops. Video Maker, where is that? Oh, this is the discussion page. This is good. Glad to see that feedback's starting to roll in. Here's another question I want to talk to you guys about here in a minute or two. Let me find that video, make a link. There it is directly. Let's just go straight to the article. Less messy that way. Here we go. Okay, alumni offer their film school advice. Sarah, writer, director of Good Girl Jane. Never heard of it. I'm assuming it's a good film. What should aspiring filmmakers consider when picking a film school? Did this come into play with any of you when you picked UCF? This is an interesting point that she's making. And I've had some conversations with people about picking film schools and stuff. How many of you came to UCF because you felt like that was kind of your only option? And how many of you chose UCF, for instance, coming from another state or another city in Florida? Where y'all coming from?
I mean, I originally, oh, sorry. I was just, I originally wanted to go to, oh, okay. I originally wanted to go to Florida State, but I know that their program is like a much lower population, more doors open, way harder to get in. You have to have a portfolio like before you even go in. So that was something I barely had and I didn't feel confident. So I just decided to go to UCF. And when I toured it, I was thoroughly impressed with like their program, the equipment, all that stuff, because it's all better than most schools that I did tour.
That's good. So you actually went up there and took a look around.
I did that before. Yeah.
That's good. That's really good. Anybody else?
So I'm from Miami, and I was not interested in going to FIU because the campus where they did have film was like pretty far from my house. And I originally was convinced to come to UCF after I went on a junior college trip, and I just fell in love with the campus. And I was like, this is the only other school I applied to, because I really didn't want to do go to study in Miami, even though I know in Miami, when I go back from graduating, I'm sure there'll be job opportunities there.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure there will be. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm from Sarasota, Florida.
Uh-huh.
And I grew up a big fan of the University of Florida. So I don't think they have any real film program or anything like that there. So that's why I never really looked at it. I think I toured UCF my sophomore year in high school, and like everyone else said, I pretty much fell in love with it. I thought it was awesome. And then I didn't really tour any other colleges after that. So my bias was pretty much UCF from the get-go.
Okay, that's interesting. There is the Ringling College of Art in Sarasota. I trust you're familiar with that.
Yeah, my uncle went there.
I think it's another high-profile program, though, where there's strict criteria for admittance and portfolios required and all kinds of stuff. So, so the question addressed in this article, what to do when considering a film school, is it's kind of an interesting issue. My thing is, I think many students really don't have the luxury of, choosing between different candidates in terms of film school. If you have to apply and if you have to get accepted, I think you take, the situation that is presented to you, as opposed to saying, well, I'm going to go to USC, but I haven't been accepted there. And, if you don't get accepted, you really, there's not much you can do in terms of attending. But it's interesting to know whether or not, you chose UCF or you came here for a lack of options, or if you came to UCF simply because it was the easiest course of action to take, the least expensive. That can often be the case. I know that when I was, really young, I knew that, my parents weren't going to be any help to me in terms of tuition assistance or, really any kind of help as far as that goes in terms of my college career. So as a young and inexperienced young adult, I kind of went to the places that made it easiest for me to be involved and to participate, because I really didn't know what my options were. So it's interesting, your choice of film school, how you end up at a certain place, and what your criteria were for selecting that place to be educated. This person is talking about the quality of the faculty and the quality of the alumni. If you take a look at the people graduating from a program and what their accomplishments have been, and does that play any role in your decision-making process? It can be a really relevant, valid question. If you're somebody who's going to NYU, you probably have a huge list of successful alumni that you can point to and say, that individual got an education here. That's why I'm here. I want my career to emulate theirs in some way. UCF has less bragging rights in that regard. So it's interesting what some of your criteria might be for choosing UCF. Maya, a manager in talent relations, working at Netflix. She's addressing the issue, what's the area of focus that every film school should have? And we're talking about, or she says, when you're transitioning out of film school into the industry, one of the most difficult stages in her career were the communities driven by alumni relations, and that can be important, an important support system. Graduates looking for work can look for mentorship and guidance from folks that are coming out of their program. That's something that is happening a little bit, like for instance in Atlanta right now. There's a growing community of UCF alumni that are working successfully in Atlanta, and that becomes a good network to be a part of when you're thinking about going to that market yourself and entering into a situation where you don't know a lot of people. Relying on your alumni relationships is a really good positive benefit for selecting a film school. I know students have come to me and broached the concept of the film program and what they do and don't like about it. Given that this is a capstone class and you're all imminently graduating seniors, your feedback in that regard, while it may not help you directly in this moment of your completion of your degree, it might be good feedback to provide at some point to those of us who remain, so that we can make the experience better for the people that are coming up behind you. In this context, Maya is asked, what advice would you give somebody who is currently a film student who is about to enter out into the industry? Stay open to where your work will take you. She says when she started, she was convinced that her dream was to be a director. She's pushed herself. She tries to remain open to the possibilities. I think that's really good advice that you can give somebody is, yes, I understand that, the vast majority of film students all want to be directors. But you have to look at the situation from a pragmatic point of view, which is, if you're 20 something and just graduating from film school and let's face it, a middle tier film school, are you going to direct right out of college? Probably not. It's probably a 99.5% certainty that you're not going to direct right out of film school. So at that point, what do? Do you hold out for directing jobs, and do you get a day job waiting tables and hoping and praying that, somebody comes along at random in the universe and acknowledges and recognizes you for the undiscovered talent that you are? Or do you seek other opportunities that will keep you in proximity to that long range goal and create a series of short-term goals for yourself that can do a couple of things? If you want to be a director ultimately in your career, certainly, why not? Of course, you should aspire to that end. But knowing maybe that opportunity is 10, 15 years into the future, what are you going to do in the interim? And my suggestion is to, take a really good look around and see what options you have available to you and be willing to try some stuff. almost any experience that you garner in the film industry is going to make you a better director ultimately when you do finally get that opportunity. So the worst thing in the world, I think, would be to turn down an opportunity at growth and experience if you could get it, knowing that you're not directing next week anyway. So you might as well take a job as a art director or a prop person or a script supervisor or a grip, you know, get in there, get some experience, learn to look at the process from a lot of different angles. You know, when you're a director, you're going to look at the process from a certain point of view. But it can be a very specific kind of luxury to go into a situation like a major motion picture and not be the director, but instead be a fly on the wall and watch the director who is in the hot seat and see how they handle the pressure, see what kinds of solutions they come up with when they're trying to figure out how to deal with a problem, see how they conduct themselves as a professional director in a situation where they're working with, you know, studio producers and a big crew and so forth, and take all that information, process it and catalog it and put it somewhere, store it somewhere in your brain for future use. You don't always have to be at the helm to understand how the boat works and how to handle it, and to imagine how you might take the helm when the opportunity is presented to you. I think it's good sometimes to be able to get paid and be in the environment and have the luxury of watching other individuals do that job that you envision for yourself one of these days. So, you know, I'm all about keeping your eyes open and your options many, you know, and accessible, so that, and hey, what's, you know, the worst thing that can happen if you discover some aspect of the business that you never really thought about before, didn't realize existed before, and that maybe you like better than the possibility of being a director. Not saying that that'll happen, but stranger things have happened. You know, if you're open to the possibilities and keeping your eyes peeled for an opportunity, a lot of times that can be the best course of action that you can give for yourself, and then just learn to have fun in the situation and enjoy being there, you know, because we don't know how long this situation is going to last. You know, are you going to be in the business for a year, 5 years, 10 years? We don't know. We really don't. And there's very little way to be sure of what that outcome is going to be. You just got to kind of ride it out. So the less pressure you can put on yourself and the more open you can be to possibilities, I think the more you're guaranteed a measure of success in some form. It just may not take the form that you expected, but will represent at some point to you success nevertheless, you know, by a certain definition. Someone asked her if she had a mentor during her time in the film program. And the answer was her thesis advisor pushed her to build a network of people that she could trust and evaluate. How are you folks situated in that regard? Have you found sufficient, adequate mentorship while you've been here at UCF? And if not, is there still time, for instance, for you to build that kind of a relationship? These are questions you can ask yourself. I'm curious to know what your feedback is in that regard. Have you had professors, for instance, that have been effective in helping you reach your goals or visualize your goals more effectively? And if so, who are they?
The other day I emailed Zach Beckler and asked him, because I heard a rumor that Isotope RX9, the sound editing program, was going to be on the advanced media lab machines. And then I just like confirmed it with him, and he was like, yeah, it's going to be there at this time, and you just have to email Bovin about it. He talked to him. I talked to him, and then he basically was like, yeah, again, just say whenever, I'll let you in the lab and you can do whatever you need to do. I'm like, great. I'm glad that it was like smooth and it was a great transition. It didn't feel like it was like, I guess, like annoying to work with or whatever.
Okay. I think of something a little different, I guess, when I speak about mentorship. I mean, that's sounds like awareness and confirmation of accessibility to resources and assets within the program. And that's certainly, you know, can be a big help to you. But when I think of mentorship, I think of, you know, have you found some, is there somebody that you feel like you can go to when you don't know what your next move's going to be? And it's maybe the cause of a measure of anxiety. You really don't know what you're going to do when you get out of school. What's the best way to approach competing for a job when you're up against somebody with a resume bigger than yours? Or what would be a good school to consider for a graduate degree? Should I stay or should I go to another school for a graduate degree? You know, more existential questions, I think, than simply, do we have a certain kind of software available in the editing lab? Both arguably important questions that need answering. But I guess what I'm asking you is have you found somebody, either in your school relationship or outside of the university relationship, that you can go to when you have those other kinds of concerns? Because those individuals are going to be super important to you at all stages in your career. It's always good to have somebody that you can turn to, that you can ask advice from, who's going to give you the no bullshit answer, based on how well they know you. If it's a really hard truth that, you know, that they might temper a little bit before they club you over the head with, you just suck at that and you shouldn't try it, you know. Are there people that you can turn to? Start thinking about that. Even now, I think it's good for you to think about that. Who are those people? Who forms your support network? Who are they? And you know, will they be with you moving forward, or will you have to find new mentors when you leave school, for instance?
Well, I was gonna say, I guess in that case, I had a professor at my community college. His name was Steve Chase. He started the Florida State Film Program at one point. He was like one of the first professors when it opened, and he was the one that told me about like everything about the Florida State Film Program, like where it was, how it developed, where it was at that point. And then he told me about UCF. He told me about FIU. He told me about all the different schools, pretty much. And I remember he specifically said, "Look at it all," and I was like, "All right." So I toured all those schools. So
yeah, good. You know, I've had a number of mentors in my life, in my career, and I think you know, some of the best mentors I have are the people who, even if I don't have a current relationship with, I can still think of advice, recall advice that they had given me, or comments that they had made, observations that they had shared, that have relevance to me, even if we're still talking or not. Those are the types of resources I think I'm talking about. And it sounds like that's what that professor was to you early on, was somebody that, you know, even if you haven't spoken to them in a while, the exchanges that you have had still have relevance if you think back to, you know, the conversations that you had and the situations that you're dealing with. If you don't have those relationships, seek them out. They can be really comforting when all else seems bleak in the industry, and it can sometimes seem a little bleak, you know, especially if you move to a new city after you graduate and you leave. You know, let's say you're from Orlando and you've never really lived outside of the state of Florida before, but after you graduate from college, you realize Orlando, as far as a job market, has limited resources and, you know, a limited number of options and opportunities, and that it might become necessary for you, for instance, to move to Atlanta. And then so you know, you make the leap, you know, you move to Atlanta, you find a little apartment, you get situated, and you're out, you know, looking for jobs every day. And, you know, it's hit and miss, and, you know, it's snowy and cold, and you don't really know that many people. And all of a sudden, you know, the situation can become overwhelming. Who do you turn to at that point in time? Sometimes, you know, it's nice to think that you could find, you know, fellow alumni, seek them out, and seek community with them in the new place that you find yourself. And if you can't do that, you know, are your mentors still accessible to you, you know, either in your memory or by phone or email or whatever, to help keep you grounded and keep you in the boat, I used to say, you know. Think about those things. It's important. It's not always going to be your experience in the film industry is not always going to be about what happens on the film set and what specific skills you have and what you're exercising at the time. Sometimes it's going to have those other intangible added values that I'm talking about, like, you know, how well do you handle it when it's been 6 weeks since you've had a job and you don't have any phone calls and you're not quite sure where that next work is going to come from? You know, how well do you handle that kind of pressure before you know, you panic or call it quits or make a rash decision that you might regret 6 months down the line or whatever? And then who do you turn to in those situations? Build a safety net for yourself, empower yourself to succeed in the best way possible. Did you find this article helpful? Did you find it to be a good read? Those of you who have read it at this point. I don't know. I'm of two minds on asking alumni their advice to aspiring students. I think it has to do a lot with how long ago was that individual a student at your institution? How far have they advanced in their own career in the interim since they were a student? You know, I think, you know, the best advice that can be given is the advice that's derived from experience and experiences that are in the affirmative, you know. So I'm always kind of, you know, skeptical of students giving other students advice unless, like I said, there's been a space and time since that person was last a student in the same program, and you know, is there some context for their point of view? This individual here, what advice do you wish someone had given you when you're a film student? Anybody have a sense of that yet? I mean, you haven't gotten out of the program at this point, but is there any advice that you wish you had gotten earlier on in the program that you might have been able to put into action now? Do you have a sense of that yet? I think that's a question we might ask you a year from now, perhaps.
I think probably like seeking out those like mentorships you were talking about, and also just events to like get on-set experience, whether it be like with other student films and stuff. Because I feel like classes don't really prepare us for on-set or even off-set like experiences, at least not to the extent I would want to.
Yeah,
but yeah,
that's pretty hard to do, by the way. Even in the production structured classes, a lot of times it's hard to simulate the environment you're going to experience when you get out into the world like that. The best we can do is intellectualize about it, talk about it, simulate it as best we can while you're here, and stabilize your mind so that when you set foot in that environment, you don't lose your wig, you know, that you can manage your expectations and your excitement and, you know, forge ahead with some kind of functional course of action that keeps you in it and involved. It's kind of the context of this article as well. If you haven't read it, give it a good look over. It's good feedback to have. It's always good to hear, you know, some of the ways in which other people have sort of managed their expectations or curtailed their objectives or their ambition or reshaped their ambition based on feedback that they got only after they graduated and got out into the world. I knew that the world was going to be vastly different from my college experience. And so I sought the rectification of all my points of view as quickly as possible. I got out into the job market immediately and just started working and doing anything and everything I could possibly do to get a strong sense of what that situation was about, who the people were that were involved, how to move around in it, how to identify it, how to find that world when I needed it. A lot of that stuff is stuff that you won't learn in film school. Unless you have a program that is particularly steeped in vocational training and community outreach from within the organization before you even leave school. And, you know, this program arguably is, you know, not that situation. So it's just, you're going to learn a lot when you get out into the world. And I guess what I'm saying is the only way to learn it is to get out there. Looking at it from the outside in gives you benefit only of a limited understanding of what it's all about. You got to be steeped in it. You got to get out in it, and you got to get out in it as soon as possible. Did you do the right thing going to film school? I think you did. And I think the only possible answer you could have is yes, unless there's a definitive no stuck in your craw. You know, I think the answer is yes. I don't think there's any experience that you could deem unvaluable when you're talking about preparing for your career. So unless you just feel like, man, I wasted my time, I should have been out there sooner, you know, I think the investment of time is fine. I think it's a good thing to actually be very sober and methodical about how you approach the beginning of your career, whatever that career is, and make sure that you have prepared yourself amply as best you can. Take advantage of the time that you have here. Make your mistakes while you're here at school so you make fewer of them when you get on the outside. Build your portfolios and your resumes and your lay the groundwork for your networking relationships. Join the trade organizations. Have a plan. And that's kind of what this class is going to be about moving forward, is having a plan and how you're going to approach the reality of your imminent graduation and what can you do in preparation for those moments. If you haven't read this article, take another look at it, or take an initial look at it, I should say. And then, of course, you're going to comment on in the discussion post, you're going to comment on the first article that we discussed. I've got it looks like I've got maybe a quarter or a third of the people and responses that we should be getting from the whole group. So don't forget to do that assignment. It's on web courses now. There's really not much else for us to cover this week. We're just sort of getting our ball rolling here. So I don't want to keep you guys for the full 3 hours today. I kind of want to let you go early. I have a meeting that I need to attend anyway here in a few minutes. I want to encourage you, though, to reach out if you have any outstanding questions from either of these reading assignments, or if you have any need for conversation or clarification on any of these matters. Also understand that I can be available to you guys for this sort of thing, specifically in what this article is talking about in terms of guidance and mentorship and so forth. I have been there. I have done this thing, right, for a long time. Okay. And I remember what it was like to be young in it. I remember what it was like to be new in it. I remember the fear. I remember the anxiety. And at least from the point of view of what I felt and how I addressed the issues, I can offer that kind of feedback to you. So reach out if you have any issues or concerns like that. And, you know, let's work through it. Let's get you feeling good about, because you should feel good about graduating and getting out there into the industry, but having completed your degree, you've completed that objective. That's going to be really, really important in boosting your confidence. If you say you're going to do something, do it and see it through to its completion, right? Whether it's a degree or a film project, right? Do what you say you're going to do it on time, do it on budget, do it with gusto or with panache, and that will become the basis for your reputation, which would be a solid one, right? So that's what I've got for you this afternoon. I want you to think about that, let those concepts marinate. Like I said, there's not much else for me to present to you at this point in time. And I do have an imminent commitment to see to here. So reach out to me. You know, you got my email. We also have the email forum in web courses. You can reach me there or email me directly at my .ucf.edu account. And we can do a Zoom meeting between us if you need to, or we can simply, you know, we can chat by email, chat by phone, whatever you want to do. Okay. We'll start talking about some more lofty concepts next week. I think the concept is something about building a reel, perhaps. Yeah, reels, drafts of reels, starting to look at things like documents that can substantiate your experience. Okay. So on that note, if there are no objections, I think what I will do is call for adjournment this afternoon, and we should all agree to meet the same time next week. And like I said, in the interim, reach out to me if you have any questions. Okay. Are we good with that plan? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second? I have 2 seconds. Excellent.
Yep.
Very good. Well, folks, thanks for your time and attention. I appreciate it. If you had a question and we didn't get to it, send me an email. We'll cover it then, or you can bring it to class next week and we will address it then. Otherwise, have a good afternoon. Thanks so much for your attention, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.